You are listening to 95.7 FM WELT, Fort Wayne, radioactive. The opinions and views expressed in the show are those of the hosts and guests only. They do not represent those of FreeThought Fort Wayne, WELT, or any other organization. Welcome to the Hoosier Humanist Hour, where we explore science, religion, culture, ethics, and community from the humanist perspective. Join us as we discuss those topics and more, free from the ideologies of religion and superstition.
So hello to all of our listeners and welcome to another fine hour of the Hoosier Humanist Hour. Today we have Andrew, we have Chris, we have Dee, and myself, V. As usual, this show is put together by members of FreeThought Fort Wayne. To get in touch with us, you should probably visit us on our Facebook page, facebook.com/FreeThoughtFW, or you can send us an email at fortwayneaha@gmail.com. For today, we have two interesting topics. We'll see if we get to both of them or if one of them is going to take up all the time. But the two things that seem to be setting the internet ablaze these days are the fact that researchers from the SETI Institute, that's the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, seem to have detected some kind of signal that originates from some star some many, many light years away. And the second topic is on the teen birth rate. Apparently, the teen birth rate has significantly decreased, as much as 50% since 2007. Well, actually, it's 42% since 2007, but significant decrease in less than a decade. So, with that, what do you guys think?
What are we going into first? The teen birth rate?
Let's start with the more interesting thing. Let's start with space and detecting aliens and all that.
Yes.
That seems to be our favorite subject on the show. So, it's only appropriate.
Now, I did read that this signal was not detected by SETI first. It was actually discovered by, I believe, some Russian-based monitoring system out in space, and I think they kept it top secret for a while, or kept it secret for a while.
Yeah, they've kept it secret, I believe, since March.
Okay.
And they haven't given really a good explanation, as far as I'm aware of, as to why they didn't mention it. But, definitely it's interesting to detect those kind of signals.
What exactly are they looking for? Does anybody know, what they're looking for, what makes a signal significant, why they would concentrate on this one, for instance, as opposed to other ones?
Yeah, so they're using radio telescopes.
Sure.
So imagine giant, satellite dishes. And those things are very directional. So when you point them in a given direction, they're not going to receive signals from any other direction. It's a very, very narrow range that the signal can come from for them to receive it. So that's how they can look at a particular star and know that it's not that the signal is coming from that star system, and its planets, and it's not coming from the one next to it. Because space is big, so stars that could be light years away from each other, when viewed from Earth, can be, very, very close to each other. So you need a very, very directional type of antenna to listen for radio signals, and that's why they use these giant satellite dishes. But they're looking for just radio signals, basically the same stuff that you listen to in your car, or when you're listening to FM radio, and the same radio signals that we use in our satellites that are all around Earth and transmit all kinds of signals. So that's the kind of stuff that they're looking at.
Is there a limit to like, I mean, with any signal, there could be, I mean, an infinite amount of frequencies, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So how, I mean, how do they know what frequency to look at, or I mean, how do they do that?
Yeah, I mean, certain frequencies are better than others for um, transmitting information. Um, you're not gonna. I mean, technically, okay. So if you take a radio signal and make it a really, really high frequency radio signal, you're eventually gonna make light. So, with light, it travels in one direction, but it's pretty much blocked by anything. If you have any kind of solid surface in between, or even some dust, you're toast. That's going to get dispersed, it's going to get blocked, all that. So you can use light for communication, it is used, but it's, the application has to be right. For things like radio and TV, you use an antenna that broadcasts in all directions, and anybody can pick up the signal, and I think these are more or less the signals that they're looking for, and those signals have certain characteristics that at least engineers on Earth have figured out to be the most useful for sending out the radio, TV signals, and your cell phone signal, all that kind of stuff.
Interesting.
So with different frequencies, like if you're listening to AM radio, versus back in the day, shortwave radio used to be very popular. Today, pretty much everyone just uses FM, right? But on FM, you can listen to a signal in your city, anywhere like maybe 20, 30 miles outside of the city, and you're going to lose that signal.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So, for example, there's two space probes that we send out, the Voyager 1 and 2, and I believe those are the farthest man-made objects that we've ever sent. So those things are leaving the solar system. They have very low power transmitters. With that transmitter, you couldn't on Earth, if you broadcast in every direction as if you would a regular radio, you couldn't hear it more than a mile or 2 miles, something like that. But because it is very, very directional, with a nice satellite dish-like transmitter, we can pick up that signal from the other side of the solar system. And we're actually still, as those probes are leaving the solar system, we're still, some of the instruments on those probes are still alive, and we're still receiving information from those.
Interesting. What about you're basically implying that this signal that they're picking up had to have been, how far away is it? Like 200 light years away? The star?
I think the star was supposed to be 94 light years away.
Okay, so 100 light years, we'll round it up.
Right.
But how directional of a signal must you have? Was this like, I mean, or how strong of a signal would you have to have for it to disperse, 360 degrees to actually reach us and us be able to actually read it or gather it?
So this is a part of the reason why some scientists are somewhat disinterested in this signal, because it was actually too strong. Yeah. So basically, if you were to disperse the signal in all direction from 94 light years away, that signal would have to be 100 billion watts strong. So that's hundreds of times more energy than all the sunlight that falls on Earth.
Right.
Just ridiculous, right?
Ridiculous.
It's just not, no one is gonna use that powerful of a transmitter. It's just not practical, and I can only imagine the size of the antenna that they would have to have. Now,
but this isn't.
Here's what directionality does for you, though. So in the same article that I was reading, they said, well, let's take the biggest satellite dish on Earth. It's 1,000-foot diameter dish at Arecibo is called the place where the dish is. And with that size of a dish, with 1,000-foot diameter dish, to transmit a signal with this strength over 94 light years, you'd have to use 1 trillion watts.
Wow.
So that's comparable to all the electricity consumption of mankind.
Well, maybe this is a very advanced civilization, and
I mean, it could be, and they would have to really want to talk to us in order to build that big of a dish with that strong of a signal.
I don't know. Sounds like Star Killer Base to me. I don't know.
Star Killer Base. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar.
The new Star Wars. Yeah.
Oh, I must not have seen that. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Just keep the Death Star away from us.
Yeah, right.
So, Chris, I'm pretty sure you've mentioned this before. You believe, and I believe this too, that the possibility of life is pretty much inevitable considering the numbers, right? Do you believe there's life out there?
Yeah, it's guaranteed.
Pretty much guaranteed, yeah.
Yeah. It's just the chances of intelligent life are much less so because you need special circumstances.
Sure.
And luck, a lot of luck.
Do you have any opinion on, like, and I know you don't like to philosophize too much here, but like on the Fermi paradox, or why we're not seeing signs of intelligent life, the history of it or something? Because assuming how old the universe is and just the numbers themselves, if one species like us can develop and we continue to advance, then obviously you could see us colonizing things over 1 million, 100 million years, 1 billion.
Well, just to put things in perspective, probably a good way to look at it is to think of us here on this planet Earth as being a needle in a haystack the size of Earth.
Yeah.
And us communicating or having communications from another sentient organism on that haystack, it's pretty low chances.
And you're probably being generous in your analogy too.
Probably
very generous. I mean, that's the one thing, like all these arguments, they make sense as far as thinking about it from our little tiny human perspective, but when you actually put some scale on the size of it all, it's like it's unbelievable. It's daunting.
Yeah, my wife was kind enough to post this video to my Facebook page today. It was awesome because it really tried to put this whole scale into perspective for you. I mean, it started out at the level of the Milky Way being a dot, and then it zoomed into the Milky Way, zoomed in another few levels of our solar system, then zoomed in a few more levels of magnification just to get down to our planet, and then zoomed down a few more levels of magnification just to get down to the level of a cell. I mean, it really tried to put everything in perspective for you just to show how we literally are just a drop in the ocean of worlds out there in the universe.
And that's just the galaxy. Like, you can zoom out from the galaxy just as far again.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's pretty wild. I never get tired of that stuff. Blows my mind constantly.
Yeah.
There's a great little video. It's about 6 minutes long from the Museum of Natural History. It's basically a 2-scale zoom out from Earth to the edge of the visible universe. Basically the microwave background. And it's to scale. So you start out from Earth, you get a perspective of how big the Earth is, how tiny it is, and then the moon, and how far away the moon is. Like, the moon is so freaking far away. And how far away we are from the sun, and then, you know, how tiny we are, and then we get to the solar system. You just keep zooming out all the way, and it's done very well. And it's the best one I've seen. Is totally mind-blowing. I definitely recommend this. The Museum of Natural History 2-scale zoom out from Earth of the known universe, for any listeners who are interested out there.
No, it's kind of interesting when you start thinking about it, because the scale of the Earth and the sun and the distance between us is really not dissimilar at all to the very fine scale of an atom.
Yeah.
We normally see an image of an electron that's decently sized, within probably 5 radii of its radius from the nucleus of the atom, and it's just that's not even remotely the case. That electron is uber tiny and it is very, 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 very far from that nucleus, and yet it exhibits so much power that it allows us to have all these chemicals that enable the formation of molecules and everything beyond that. It's just mind-blowing to think everything is just empty space.
Yeah, I know.
And yet empty space is so powerful.
Yeah, that is really interesting. So you're basically saying that our solar system is an atom? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, that's what's really cool, is that so many of these mechanisms like replicate themselves at higher levels. So whether you're talking about like we were just saying, the relationship between atoms and the solar system, or even just talking about the way that the universe is set up. I mean, the way that the universe looks and operates, it's all within the same confines and the same physics that define the way a tree looks or the way that your blood vessels work. Everything is tree shaped. And it's incredible to kind of look at it like that and see just how effective flow pattern and direction are to the flow of matter, flow of energy, just the flow of life. It's incredible to look at.
Yeah, it sure is.
Is one of you guys seen there was someone that posted a picture of the universe as we know it and compared it to basically a brain scan where they show how all the neurons are organized and all that. And the funny thing was again, like you were saying, how similar those things are.
They do this.
There's this.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, V.
Oh no! I was just gonna say it's just amazing that it. Every time I see it, it just amazes me that two things so vastly different look so similar.
There's this really interesting computer simulation that they've done. I cannot remember what it's called, but they basically programmed it with the laws of physics and started off with, at some point past the Big Bang where we know what the physics are, and just allowed it to develop over time. So gravity would bring hydrogen and helium together, and they would make huge stars, and they would blow up, and then gravity would bring back the materials again, and these stars were just, being created from the dust of the universe and blowing up. And then what they do is they extrapolate that out, and then they take a look and see what develops in the program, and if it matches what we see from our own telescopes, then we think we have a pretty good idea of how the physics works and where the universe came from. Like, that is a really, really great thing to look into if you never have some of those programs. I cannot remember what the latest one was, but it's very impressive, and it has that kind of network of galaxies that you were mentioning, because that's what they call the cosmic web, which is just like a huge web of more or less galaxies. Is that kind of what you were talking about, V?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Blows my mind, man. Love it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and as we're getting better and better at understanding, the laws of physics, how the universe works, all those kind of simulations are becoming better, more accurate, and we're eventually going to be able to simulate and make much better predictions,
Right.
Especially with the advent of quantum computers. If these things actually pan out, if we actually can build useful quantum computers with multiple what they call qubits in them, or whatever the single computational unit within a quantum computer is, and we'll be able to simulate basically the entire known universe.
Yeah.
Somebody I think was saying that we would only, and this sounds incredible to me, and I questioned how accurate that was, but it was from a decent source. They said we would only need like 100 of those, fundamental quantum computing units to be able to simulate the entire universe, which sounded way too incredible and easy to be true. I mean, not that this is easy, but
Yeah, I don't know from what I know of quantum computers, I don't know if they can simulate the universe from that many qubits, but they can actually put that many variables into a question.
yeah,
So I don't know if that would actually be the same as simulating a universe, but you can have that many variables in the question, and you would basically have an instantaneous answer from the computer.
right, right. Well, I think the idea was just in terms of computational power,
Yeah,
and if you took the computational power and compared to classical computers, um, and they had to kind of estimate the computational power of the universe, which again is, I have no idea how they came up with the numbers they came up with, but it was a decent source. But the idea is that we're getting better and better, and we'll eventually be able to, if not simulate the entire thing, simulate significant enough portions that we'll know how things progressed, and we'll be able to wind back the clock to the beginning and all that.
yeah. Maybe that's
And
what.
what's
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
sorry, I was just going to interject with a little bit of what I've been learning in my own computer classes I've been taking. It's kind of humbling to think about how fast the digital age has been progressing.
Yeah.
Just studying some of the history of it here, I was reminded of good old ENIAC. If any of you are familiar with that, he was one of the first computers ever devised, and basically occupied 100 feet worth of space, tons. And this was in 1945. 25 years later, in 1970, we were able to wrap the entire power of that computer into a microprocessing chip that forms a CPU. So a
Oh,
tiny
yes.
chip from an entire room in 30 tons in 25 years.
Yeah.
Just to give you an idea of the scale of our miniaturization technology. So where we go from here is just like ridiculous to think about.
I think we've done it again since then. In
Yeah.
25
Oh, yeah.
years, we've done the exact same thing to that chip.
Yep.
We've done that many, many times.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, there's an often cited example of, your smartphone has more computing power than NASA had when it sent people to the moon.
Right.
The entire NASA, not just like
Yeah,
one
yeah.
NASA.
Yeah.
Yeah, not just the spacecraft, entirety of NASA.
Yeah.
You have it in your pocket now. You can launch. You have no excuse not to launch any rockets.
Right.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to a really good quantum computer and Watson on my phone. Because
There you go.
Watson, I can just ask Watson any question. Where do we come from, Watson? Well, there's a 87% 5-4 probability that you came from this or that. I would just walk around all day talking to Watson because I'd be far more entertaining than the vast majority of humans I know, myself
That's
included.
true. That's true.
Well,
Who's your best friend?
Sort
That's a
of
dumb
do
question,
that with
Watson.
Siri today.
What'd you say, V?
Oh, I said you can kind of sort of do that with Siri on your iPhone.
Yeah, she's boring though.
Yeah.
It's kind of like having a conversation with a 3-year-old. It's cute and fun for a little while, but you're not going to get any actual content out of it.
Yeah. I remember a few months back, Microsoft actually released some kind of a robotic thing that you could talk to on the internet, and it was supposed to learn from people.
Yeah.
Oh man, that backfired
Didn't
significantly.
it
It immediately became like this misogynistic Nazi robot that wanted to hate everyone and exterminate everything, and it just, because people will teach the thing junk, right? But as with anything that learns, it's only as good as what it encounters. And when you encounter a bunch of little idiots on the internet, you get those kind of results.
Yeah, I guess we like to talk about what we're excited about, and hate and all that stuff tends to be a really exciting topic.
Oh yeah. So,
Well,
to wrap it back a little bit onto space, with what you mentioned, D, with the Fermi paradox, one thing that, is part of the Fermi paradox, which I think would be really interesting for everyone to hear.
yes.
So Fermi had calculated, I believe it was Fermi, that even for a slow species like we are, at the speed that we have, if we are sufficiently determined to colonize the galaxy, we could colonize the entire galaxy in between 5 and 50 million years.
Wow, that's not very long at all.
No. I mean, if you think about it, Alpha Centauri, which is the nearest star, is only, or maybe it was Proxima Centauri that's the nearest, but they're both fairly close. But they're only like 4 or 5 light years away. So, we're nowhere near being able to send a spacecraft at, like 0.1, 0.2 the speed of light. But, even if at the speeds that we can achieve, I think, with a sufficiently determined, group of people, we could reach those stars. And, if they happen to have habitable planets, those could be populated. And then you just keep expanding and you have this multiplying effect of, every new settlement generating a new point of colonization. And, once you start multiplying things out, it starts to fill up pretty quickly.
I wonder what just the odds are of having another habitable planet are. I mean, there's so many things about Earth that are like absolutely perfect. Like its magnetic field, it's really not very elliptical orbit. I mean, just on and on and on. The right oxygen level. I mean, a habitable planet for us would be like a needle in a haystack too. Well, I mean, we would have to basically colonize for the most part with contained ships.
But
Well,
you have such a vast haystack though that you're guaranteed almost to have others out there.
I know, but when the nearest star is 4 light years away,
And given time, we'll get there.
yeah, I don't know. I think the Fermi paradox argues against that, Andrew.
well, one thing to think about, just look at the solar system. If Mars was a little bit bigger, it actually should have been at least partially habitable. Part of the reason why Mars, at least from what I understand, is not, hospitable to life as we know it, is because its core cooled and solidified, so it couldn't anymore generate the magnetic field,
Right.
which then allowed the atmosphere to be blown away by the solar wind. But technically, just in our solar system, if Mars was just bigger so that its core, could last longer as Earth's core, we could have 2 habitable planets just in the solar system.
That's a really good point.
And we know for a fact that, as asteroids have stricken Mars, they've knocked out rocks that have actually landed on Earth. And we know that, there's certain extremophile type organisms out there that could survive the journey. So there's even some, very speculative hypotheses out there that life may have actually originated on Mars and one of those rocks brought it to Earth.
So if you want to see a Martian, just look in a mirror.
Yeah.
Oh,
Hey.
ouch.
Yeah. So, and we know there was recently, I was reading an article about a planet that was rather large. I think it was several times the size of Earth. That was orbiting a like a really dim star. I don't know if it was a red giant or something like that, but it was fairly dim. But the planet was really close. I think it was rotating around its star in a matter of a few weeks, something like that. So really fast, really close. But because that star is so much dimmer, the side that faces the star would be at a temperature where you could have liquid water. But because that particular planet was so close to the star, what was the term called? Where only one side faces the star, like it doesn't rotate like Earth.
It was tidally locked.
Tidally locked. That's the term I'm looking for. So, the one side of the planet is always dark, and the other one is always illuminated by the star. And I don't know how bright it would be, if it would be, as bright as we see light here on Earth. I would imagine not, but at least the heat would be there, which is probably the more important thing.
How much does the atmosphere change on a planet over time? Like, if we were to magically beam back 1 billion years on Earth, would we be able to survive? Would we be able to breathe the air? Does anybody know the answer to that question?
See, the problem with that is that life really throws a wrench into the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because this planet wasn't long without life. It almost seemed like it was cultivated for the express purpose of forming life. Not to get into anything religious there, but it's very interesting to look at that, because you can almost see a period of time where the very first organisms on this planet were photosynthetic. And they were very simple organisms, so it was primarily like photosynthetic microorganisms that were basically cyanobacteria. And so they would sit there and they would gather energy from the sun, create glucose. That was predominantly what happened on this planet. And they would survive just fine. And it took about 1 billion years for those organisms to get to the point where they became, where there was enough oxygen in the atmosphere produced by those photosynthetic organisms that it became healthy of an atmosphere for eukaryotic life that actually fed on other life. So that's where we really started to see the carnivores come into play, because there was enough oxygen for them to be able to use the oxygen to break down the glucose, and in turn make carbon dioxide. So really it was the photosynthetic organisms that changed the whole face of this planet from being, predominantly carbon dioxide as far as the lesser gaseous materials are concerned. And we're ignoring nitrogen. Nitrogen's weird, and we're not going to talk about that. But so we have the carbon dioxide really comprising the rest of the majority of the rest of the atmosphere. But it took 1 billion years to bring oxygen into the mix, make it a dominant composition of the atmosphere. That way we could start looking at carnivorous types of lifestyles that would be permitted. So yeah, it was a bit different and not habitable at all for us at that point in time.
Are we in like a perfect system now? Like, where if you were to extrapolate, taking the humans out of the equation, if we were to extrapolate Earth 1 billion years into the future, would it still be relatively close to what it is now? Has anybody done the work on that? Outside of some meteor hitting us or something like that?
Yeah, so really you're looking at the reestablishment of the carbon cycle, which has been really dinked with because of humans. So you basically see all this added carbon in the atmosphere from fossil fuel burning and everything that would finally be redeposited back into the soil, and we would achieve some sort of equilibrium. But the issue is that there are still those periodic cycles, those random events that come into play. Occasionally you have an ice age, and that's through no fault of anyone. It's random. It's going to happen. And so, yeah, that's going to kill a lot of life, and you're going to have a change in the composition of the atmosphere. You're going to have fewer plants, making oxygen, and so CO2 levels are likely to rise, and that will make life a little less habitable, or less ideal for some of the consumers in the food chain. Alternatively, you could have an asteroid hit the planet and result in a bunch of volcanoes blowing up and completely blocking out the sun for a number of years, throwing a bunch of sulfur into the atmosphere, along with a number of other greenhouse gases, and boom, you completely change the atmosphere because you affect the life forms on the planet, which also feed back into the changes in the atmosphere. So that's why it's never truly at equilibrium, but it certainly can hang there for a while until another random event.
So according to phys.org, as in physics.org, let's see here. It says, in a few billion years, the sun will become a red giant so large that it will engulf our planet. But the Earth will become uninhabitable much sooner than that. After about 1 billion years, the sun will become hot enough to boil our oceans. And, the sun is currently classified as a main sequence star. This means that it is in the most stable part of its life, converting hydrogen present in its core into helium. For a star the size of ours, this phase lasts a little over 8 billion years. And we're currently just over 4.5 billion years old. So we're about, halfway through its stable lifetime.
Does it say anything about it happening suddenly or slowly? So, like, if boiling is 212 degrees and we have a average temperature of 74, 75, 80, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking billions of years, it's going to be a gradual process. It's not going to be like an overnight thing. We're not talking the sun going supernova here, which eventually, actually, it might, but that'll be, yet quite a while after that, I believe.
Yep.
So.
Well, that's depressing. We only got 1 billion years. Damn.
We only have 1 billion years to live. But it's interesting though. It kind of, even though it is 1 billion years, the finality of it and the inevitability of it is kind of depressing.
It is a little depressing, yeah.
All that we've ever built, all that mankind has ever created, all evidence of that will completely disappear.
Yeah. I think that's what I love about George Carlin's comedy. He's like, he really calls out how special we think we are.
Yeah.
What if there are other civilizations, maybe countless of them, they've been wiped from the existence of the history of the cosmos?
That's the thing, is that, if we choose to defund NASA, then that will certainly become the fate of our civilization, is that we'll just disappear. But if we focus on space exploration and actually colonization, then we can certainly have our tale be spread to other parts of the universe, and it will be preserved to some degree.
Absolutely. We could move humanity onto interstellar ships. Think, Star Trek-like type stuff. I mean, it looks crazy now, but, tell someone in 1901 that 50 years later or 60 years later would be landing on the moon, and they would have told you're absolutely insane, and would have probably want to put you in a straitjacket. Tell someone in 1950 that you'll have an iPhone in your pocket 50 years later, and you'll have basically the sum total of the human knowledge at your fingertips. For free, basically, or for a monthly fee of 5 hours at a minimum wage, they would think you're absolutely mad.
True. Let's do it again.
And hey, scientists are working on it.
Yeah.
It'll happen. It'll happen. But yeah, interesting to consider those type of questions.
Yeah, pretty awesome. So what about this teen birth rate story? What's going on with that?
Oh yeah. I guess want to go switch to that. So, according to the Pew Research Center, teen birth rates have been on the decline for quite a while, and they've dropped in half basically since 2007. If you go to the Pew Research webpage on that, there's a really interesting graph that shows a peak of around 96.3 teenage births in 1955, maybe. I'm reading off the graph, so it's not very easy, and it is down to 24.2 in 2014, from what it seems here. So that it's been cut down by a factor of a quarter. So it's quite a significant drop in. And that's the birth rates. It's not the pregnancy rates and all that, although they do analyze that as well. And it seems like, they break down the categories a little bit. So between the ages of 15 and 17, dropped by 50%. Between 18 and 19, it's dropped by 39%. So the overall drop, I think, was 42%, not 50.
That's still
And that's since 2007.
And what do they attribute this drop to? Anything in particular?
They have several things that they list as the causes. One of them being the economy, actually. So the 07-09 crash, seems to have reversed a slight uptick in teen birth rates that occurred in 2006. But I guess the other factors that they mention here, okay, I found it, is less sex, use of more effective contraception, and more information about pregnancy prevention. So those are kind of the main ones. So the economy, less sex, use of more effective contraception, and more information about pregnancy prevention.
What about porn?
Well, that will only affect boys.
Yeah, well, that takes half the people out of the equation.
Let me rephrase that. Not only, but mainly.
I wonder if porn has anything to do with it. People are getting their kicks on the internet, not looking for the real thing as hard.
That's
see, I thought you were going a different direction with that, because you're starting to see more condoms used in porn than you used to. I thought you were going that direction with it.
No, I was just wondering if maybe some of the boys are like satisfied, maybe, and some of the girls do to a certain degree, enough to maybe make a big enough dent.
Gotcha.
But I don't know, speculating, who knows? That's great news, though, I would think, in general.
I think so. Well, and along with that, and here's the really interesting statistics that I found was actually a lot more interesting than just the birth rate. There's another graph here that shows abortion rates and pregnancy rates per 1,000 females ages 15 to 19. So the graph begins in 1990, and back then you had 116.8 pregnancies per 1,000 females ages 15 to 19. And I guess the latest statistics that they had were for 2009, that's down to 65.3. So that, just the pregnancy rate alone has been cut in about half since 1990. The abortion rate has been cut even more significantly, from 40 in 1990 to 16 in 2009. And if the trend line has continued, I would imagine that's down even further, because it's really, if you look at the graph, I mean, it's pretty much a straight line, no significant kinks in it, especially on the abortion rate. It's just a straight downward line.
Mm.
I thought what was most interesting about that graph was that the distance between those two lines on the graph pretty
Yeah.
much maintained the same distance, which is to say that it seemed that the abortion rate didn't change.
Hmm.
It was still 25% through that entire time period.
They did list that, but it wasn't in a graph. So it says here abortion rates among females ages 15 to 19 has also fallen over roughly the same period from 43.5 per thousand in 1988 to 16.3 in 2009 of the roughly 700,000 pregnancies among teens in 2000. Oh no, okay, never mind. That was I read on to another sentence. So, there's you got to factor in. Um, so here's the last sentence there. So it says of the roughly 700,000 pregnancies among teens in 2009, 58% were estimated to have ended in live births. 25% in abortion, and 17% in miscarriages or stillbirths. So it always that seems a very, very large percentage for miscarriages and stillbirths. 17%. I don't know what you guys think, but that seems very, very high to me.
17% of children or
Yeah,
pregnancies.
17% of teen pregnancies um, ended up in miscarriages or stillbirths for the 700,000 pregnancies in 2009 that were tracked in this survey.
Before I had kids and got involved in the whole childbearing world, I would have thought that was crazy too. But I hear more and more people, just regular, not kids, not teenagers, the amount of miscarriages and stillbirths and that sort of stuff, it surprises me how often it happens. So it doesn't surprise me at all that it would be that high of a percentage, just from my limited exposure to it.
Yeah,
Well,
I haven't had any, so.
And really, those numbers are only going to continue to increase, honestly. So, when we look at the long-term trajectory of human evolution, those numbers are only going to continue to increase because we don't have as many factors weeding out the unfit in the population. So we're going to have more and more unfit genes coming together and basically self-destructing the fetus before it can be born.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Do you think, however, medicine and medical practices will be able to keep up with that?
If we convert to Gattaca, yes.
Oh, awesome.
Start GMOing our kids, yes.
There you go.
Now, I've heard that as civilizations have become, more advanced and more docile, that the birth rate continues to decline over time. And I think even some are even like seeing a decrease in population growth. Is that true? Like, is Japan showing a decrease in population over time here? And that has some pretty interesting repercussions, extended down the road 200 or 300 years.
Oh yeah, you are. I believe you're correct. From what I understand, the Japanese population in particular has been becoming older and older because the birth rate hasn't kept up.
Yeah.
And immigration to Japan, is not nearly as high as it is to the U.S. I mean, in the U.S., you have immigrants coming all the time. I don't know why people don't go to Japan. I would imagine one of the things is the language barrier is such a daunting barrier where, for the U.S., pretty much everybody believes that they can learn English. That's kind of my hunch on it. I have no data to support that.
Yeah.
But if I had to learn, I wouldn't be worried about learning German. I wouldn't be worried about learning Portuguese. Give me a few years, I'll figure it out. Japanese,
yeah,
I am way too afraid to even attempt to learn it. I mean, writing, even if I'm able to learn to speak it a little bit, just writing would be awful.
Yeah,
because
it would be so
you
hard.
basically need a bachelor's in calligraphy just to be able to do it.
Yeah. And picking up that skill in my 30s, just does not sound very appealing.
No, I know all the Japanese that I need to know, and that's for doing sake bombs. Ichi ni song.
There you go.
Down the throat. That's about as much Japanese as I'm interested in learning.
Yes.
I don't even know if I pronounced it right. Probably not.
Well, I think you did, because I used to train karate, and there were the numbers that, when we had to repeat movements, that's how they used to count to us, ichi ni san, which is 1, 2, 3. So, I think you're correct there.
Right.
At least close, somewhat.
Yeah. Well, after a few of them, it doesn't sound that good anymore. But
but it's not, it really isn't just Japan. I mean, Europe has had, I believe, similar problem to a lesser extent. But again, Europe has had influx of immigrants from all over. So it makes a big difference. Those birth rates have been decreasing as the economy of a country improves. It is a proven fact that the birth rates decrease. People that are better off have less kids for whatever reason. I don't know, if one causes the other, or if it's a correlation that has some other reasons for it.
yeah. Well, the greatest
Oh.
work done on the subject is Idiocracy, the movie. That's the most scholarly piece of work on that topic.
That's the terrifying trajectory. I'm trying to stay optimistic here, and just think that the trends that we're seeing is just byproducts of the domestication of mankind.
Right. Well, I got to say, I watched that movie 10 years ago, or whenever it first came out, probably 20 years ago now. And I watched a bunch of clips of it on YouTube the other day, and I was like, oh my God, this movie just keeps getting better with time because it's so much more relevant.
Electrolytes, it's what plants crave.
Right.
Oh, I need to rent that movie and watch the whole thing.
I don't know. I really hope we don't reach a state such as Idiocracy. I mean, I hope that's not the case.
Yeah, luckily we have some of these trends, like what you were just mentioning, the decrease in birth rates, decrease in crime, and these sorts of trends are kind of helping shape and domesticate the human race to be more calm and reach some sort of favorable equilibrium with the planet. It's just we have to survive this entire process.
Yeah,
along
we
the
can't
way.
keep growing our population indefinitely. I mean, there are limits to the sustainable population on this planet. I was listening to a talk by Professor Al Bartlett from University of Boulder, Colorado, and he was talking about exponential growth, and it sounds like a really boring topic, but it's very applicable to population growth. And one of the best talks that I've ever listened to, really. And he was in particular tackling the population of Boulder, the town that the university is in. And, he was in I believe it was some kind of meeting with the mayor, or like the town's leadership, whatever it form that takes. And they were saying how they wanted to set a target for, growing the population of the city at 5%. And the guy was like, you cannot do this. You don't understand what it means to grow at 5%.
Mm-hmm.
Because Boulder is in a valley, so it's not like you can really expand much when you're surrounded by rock on all sides. So, that would mean that in just a few decades, the population would double and quadruple, and it just isn't enough room to build houses for people. There's just nowhere to put those kind of people. And he was saying, he kind of extrapolated that to not just Boulder, but I believe to the entire planet. And he said, we're going to have to limit the number of people and the population growth. Either we decide how to do it, or nature is going to decide. And our ways are much more humane, where nature's ways are disease, famine, starvation, that kind of stuff. So really, really horrible ways to decrease the population.
But hold on. Well, the things that you just mentioned all sound very natural. Isn't that the direction we need to go in? Is more natural ways of human population control?
Yeah. That Darwinian natural stuff is rather cruel.
I want it to be all natural as long as I'm not involved.
There you go.
Nobody's willing to have that conversation, though. I mean, it's totally taboo topic. I mean, how do you control population, limit how many children you have? I mean, yeah. I mean, I have had 2 children, and I feel good about the fact that I'm only going to replace myself and my wife with my kids. But a lot of people have more than 2 kids. Like, you would basically be telling all the people who want to have more than 2 children that they can't or shouldn't. Like, I'm sure there's other ways around that too, but...
Are we talking about somebody who's not on the show right now?
Well, yeah, possibly. I wonder if he thinks that through. My sister just has 3 kids. Some people I have some people that I work with who have 12.
God.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
Well, they love their
12 children.
You obviously, that's only an opportunity that they can do now. In 100 years, I just can't imagine being able to do that. I think it would be frowned upon, assuming population growth continues.
That is all the time we have for you this week. This has been the Hoosier Humanist Hour. Be sure to check out FreeThought Fort Wayne on Facebook and on meetup.com. Thank you for listening, and we hope your days are filled with logic, reasoning, and the eternal quest for knowledge.